So what can we give the young? Well, I suggested to one of my models that he type the following 3 words into Google: Glenn Gould Bark. Over school? Over uni already? Let's see you get over this. Let's see how that might enlarge the 18-year-old mind. Or perhaps you might show them Raging Bull. I watched it for the first time in years on a flight back from Rome recently. We subsequently screened it for some friends and their kids, and it was great to see, twinkling in the dark, the tears in the eyes and the mouths gaping as Scorsese's genius warped and tunnelled the sound enveloping the tragic figure of Jake LaMotta. With these experiences, we are all given a tremendous gift. I sometimes think of it as being a glimpse into the world of the gods. That's the kind of thing we need to show them. And just how, that night, one of my friends asked, is it possible that that faded home movie stuff in the film avoids all corniness? Well, it's because when something is great, it can be anything. Yes, in the end, it's just because. As Francis Bacon, explaining an apparently random gesture in his work, kept saying in Melvyn Bragg's great interview from the 1970s for London Weekend Television, it's because. I'd like young people to see Werner Herzog interviewing victims of the Gulf War in his haunting documentary, Lessons in Darkness. Always trying to describe an impossible state of affairs, he conducts these interviews with people who are in shock and beyond speech. They stare mutely into the camera, some mumble incomprehensibly, move their hands about. Over and over he persists in conducting these interviews, and there is great humanity in such an approach because it refuses to accommodate the audience by leaving the incommunicable where it belongs, out of reach. This is a profoundly romantic sensibility at work. Indeed, as he films the burning oil wells in the desert, a pitch-black sky overhead and Wagner, only Wagner on the soundtrack, the visual beauty of the imagery takes you by surprise, a feeling which can be deeply unsettling. I'd like to read you a short story by Robert Walser, a mere page and a half, which encapsulates a romantic state of mind and also reflects on itself in a way that can seem a bit postmodern. It's called Balloon Journey. Written in 1913, it's my favourite piece of short fiction, not least because of its exquisite articulation of the atmosphere of the sublime, an entirely parallel universe conjured from a mere page and a half of text. The 3 people, the captain, a gentleman and a young girl, climb into the basket. The anchoring cords are loosed and the strange house flies slowly as if it had first to ponder something upward. Bon voyage, shout the people gathered below, waving hats and handkerchiefs. It is 10 o'clock in the evening. The captain pulls a map from the case and asks the gentleman if he would like to do the map reading. The map can be read, comparisons made. Everything to be seen can be clearly seen. Everything has an almost brownish clarity. The beautiful moonlit night seems to gather the splendid balloon into invisible arms. Gently and quietly the roundish flying body ascends, and now, hardly so, you might even notice subtle winds propel it northward. The map-reading gentleman tosses from time to time, as directed by the captain, a handful of ballast into the depth below. There are 5 sacks of sand on board, and they must be used sparingly. How beautiful it is, the round, pale, dark depths below. The moonlight, tender and evocative, picks the rivers out, silver. One can see houses down there, so small, like innocuous toys. The forests seem to be chanting sombre and ancient songs, but this chanting strikes one as being more like a noble, silent knowledge. The earth's image has the features of a huge sleeping man, at least that is what the youthful girl dreams. She lets her bewitching hand hang indolently over the rim of the basket. Obeying a whim, the cavalier is wearing a medieval plumed hat, but is otherwise dressed in a modern way. How quiet the earth is. One can see everything distinctly, the particular people in the village streets, the church spires, Tired after a long day's work, the labourers tramping across the farmyard, the ghostly railroad streaking by, the dazzling long white turnpike. Human sorrow, familiar or unknown, seems to send up murmurs from below. The loneliness of remote regions has a special tone, such that one believes one ought to understand and even see this special thing that slips away from thought. Wondrously now the three people are dazzled as they see in the glory of its colours the luminous course of the Elbe. The nocturnal river draws from the girl a low cry of longing. What might she be thinking of? From a posy she has brought along with her, she pulls a dark rose in full bloom and throws it into the sparkling water. How sadly her eyes shine as she does so. It is as if the young woman had just now forever shed a painful conflict. It is a very painful thing, having to part company with that which torments you. And how mute the world is. Far off, the lights of a major town are glittering. The canny captain pronounces its name. Beautiful, enticing depth. Countless areas of field and forest are now behind them. It is midnight. Somewhere on the solid ground now a thief prowls, hunting for swag. There is a burglary. And all these people down there in their beds, this great sleep slept by millions. An entire earth is dreaming now, and a people rests from its labours. The girl smiles. And how warm it is, as if one was sitting in a room just like home with mother, aunt, sister, brother, or with one's lover, lamplit, and reading from a beautiful but rather monotonous long story. The girl wants to sleep. Looking at things has made her quite tired now. The two men standing in the basket gaze silently but resolutely into the night. Remarkably white, polished-looking plateaus alternate with gardens and small wildernesses of bush. One peers down into regions where one's feet would never have trod, because in certain regions, indeed in most, one has no purpose whatever. How big and unknown to us the earth is, thinks the feather-hatted gentleman. Yes, your own country does finally become intelligible from up here, looking down. You feel how unexplored and powerful it is. 2 provinces they have now crossed, and the dawn is coming. Below in the villages, human life wakens again. What's the name of this place? The leader shouts downward. A boy's clear voice replies, and still the 2 men are gazing. Now too the girl is awake again. Colours appear and things become more distinct. One sees lakes drawn inside their contours. Wondrously secluded among forests, one glimpses old bastions towering up through old foliage. Hills rise almost imperceptibly. One sees swans trembling and pale on waters, and the human voices become pleasantly audible. And onward one flies, onward, and finally the glorious sun appears, and, attracted by this proud star, the balloon soars upward into a magical dizzy height. The girl shrieks with fear, the men laugh. If we were to imagine a short or indeed incredibly long film of this balloon journey, it might have as its soundtrack the soft sound of the wind, the zephyrs circling the balloon as they run their fingers through the hair of those on board. A picture, the wind brushing through the ancient olive groves, the valley of the Kempels in Sicily, and now frozen in the undulating drapery and flowing hair of a marble statue in the British Museum. This image might provide us with an understanding of how to film these people drifting through the air on a summer's night in 1913. The soundtrack to such a film could also perhaps be drawn from the long, low goodbye that we hear in parts of Bruckner's music. All of these unlikely or incongruous juxtapositions feel to me as if they make perfect sense, but then I'm on my journey, yours will be different. I would like to convey to the young the ways in which their experience can be heightened by knowing that they are one with the art of the past, as if the gap in time had all at once ceased. This and how it can show them their own mortality and the fact that we are all stuck inside our bodies with a breathtaking power. I'd like them to experience this millennial slippage. It might be triggered by the way Maria Callas could peel away the layers of an aria to the naked emotion within. It might be Michelangelo's Academy slaves forever enacting the enigma of whether they are emerging from or disappearing back into the stone. It might be that tragic figure of Jake LaMotta as played by De Niro in Raging Bull. I think these are things that can give our children that tremendous gift, some glimpse into that world of the gods. What we have a moral duty to bequeath to our children is an apprehension of the haunted and spiritually radiant landscape of history as art has illuminated it and given it truth. Examples can have the ineradicability of fragility of personal experience. I think of Peggy Ashcroft in the television film Caught on the Train. You see all of that interminable, hopeless longing which Alexander Sokurov unfolded for us in Russian Ark. At some point, the further down you go, they look back to the east, not to Europe, all caught in the spellbinding beauty of an elderly woman's glance. Or it's the figure of James Barry, played by Ian Holm in a ravishing TV drama, The Lost Boys. And all the sadness of that Edwardian longing we also find in Forrest Reed's novels, a longing which is inseparable from sensitivity and restraint and introspection. Forrest Reed, about whom E.M. Forster said, "He is my hero," an author whom the TLS, amongst many others, referred to as possibly the greatest living writer in the English language. His books characterised by a moral fragrance, and not a single work in print today. For some inexplicable reason, Rachmaninoff's symphonic dances always remind me of this Edwardian longing. I think of how much we could learn from the vast well of articulate understatement and compassion Arthur Waley uncovered in the classical civilization of China. Isn't this what we need in order to feel compassion for and to understand our own world with its Britney Spears figures, its celebrity splendours and victims? It's the impossibly sweet mnemonics of Cy Twombly's Lost Arcadia. These impenetrable palimpsests carry the sheer weight of history as a form of loss. There is nothing more romantic in modern painting for me than these inaudible chants, because that is what it feels like to me. Standing in front of a Twombly painting, I find myself imagining that the sounds which echoed through the archaic Greek temples in Agrigento had in fact been absorbed into the surface of the walls, and, if you listened very carefully, one might hear the actual sounds made by the priests and the musicians 2,500 years ago, echoing inside the stone. They are still in there. That's what I said to myself when I stood in front of one of his paintings recently. The palpable mystery of archaic Greek sculpture. I always feel as if there are secrets hidden inside the statues, and indeed there are. How could there not be? There are 1,000 things that return to us and help us return to the lost domain of childhood, where we all roamed like gods. We need to give children a taste of this immensity, the sorrow and the exaltation of the great pilgrimage of art. I've recently been reading the work of that wonderful crank Norman Douglas. How breathtaking he is in a world of sham. We need to speak of the journey and of its poignancies. Of Seamus Heaney creating a love poem out of his meditation on the Neolithic girl discovered preserved in a peat bog. Or the moment when Beethoven, stricken with deafness, had to be turned around by the first desk of violins so he could see the applause. I think of Gustav Mahler dying and that last train that took him from Paris to Vienna and being met at every point, at every station by the crowds who came to say goodbye. I think of Thomas Mann writing Death in Venice as a consequence of reading the daily reports in the newspapers of Mahler's failing health. I think of Mozart in his pauper's grave. We need to speak of the journey and its poignancies. To quote T.S. Eliot, after such knowledge, what forgiveness? The journey into the reality and truth of the world of art allows us to arrive, predictably enough, at the shores of Ithaca. The 20th century Alexandrian poet Cavafy could be our guide. Do not expect riches upon your arrival at the island. It was the island that gave you your wonderful journey. Wise as you have become, with all your experience, you will have understood the meaning of Ithaca. Are there implications for any possible politics in this? A politician, it seems to me, should not expect to see the effect of culture, but our politicians should realise that the practice and experience of art which constitute our culture are among the most precious things we have. When a kid learns ballet or fumbles with a piano or tries to nut out a Latin poem or learns a passage of Shakespeare, do we no longer take it for granted, perhaps, that these things are the bedrock of our civilization? On and on it goes, this being propelled forward and pulled backward in time, the beautiful collapsing gravity of Rembrandt's painting, The Return of the Prodigal, in the Hermitage. The tenderness with which all futility fills one, as Elias Kennedy would say. How on earth can paint carry the evidence of such compassion? Is our political life so threadbare that it can no longer even register this compassion, or the dazzling way in which, for example, Claude Chabrol, at the end of Femme Infidèle, captures the experience of someone losing everything they've known and loved? Do our political masters really believe that art is a trivial game interchangeable with any other pastime? That the tremendous intellectual complexity of Bach, not to mention the art he made from it, count for nothing? Isn't Shakespeare what he's always been? Something that is central to our notion of civilization? In practice, if we cease to honour the ongoing creation of art and the possibility of great achievement, then we will cease to believe in art as anything other than the basket case at the bottom end of the entertainment industry food chain. We'll see the masterpieces and classics that we've been taught to cherish, the supreme works of genius, as merely heritage or museum culture, the way the current Federal Arts Minister appears to see them, exhibiting nothing but a manifest irrelevancy. It's ludicrous that anyone should have to even say that Bach or Shakespeare, Mozart or Michelangelo should be central to what we should transmit to our children. But there it is. Is there even the remotest suggestion anymore in our political context that the Arts Minister should be the natural consultant of the Education Minister? When I was 12, I was overtaken by the realisation that the ancient Egyptian tombs were for them a machine, not a monument, but a device for transportation into the next world. What fabulous strangeness. I was obsessed. Nothing has given me a more overwhelming sense of the spirit that shapes the world, of a world that feels the breath of the gods, than Egyptian architecture. For me, it's the greatest architecture on the planet, and their sculpture, unassailable and something that outstares history. These things have a superhuman otherness, and there's the stepped pyramid of Zoser again, oldest stone building in the world. Nothing can compare with the actual experience of seeing these things, but the thing that prepared me for that experience was that long-ago obsession, which I'm told is not all that uncommon among boys, a bit like girls and horses apparently, which left me overwhelmed by this vast sense of a world of absolute inward-looking intensity. No doubt there are all sorts of things about the world 40 years ago that encouraged me to read Leonard Cottrell and to fall in love with ancient Egypt. I recently showed one of my models the extraordinary TV footage of Churchill's funeral in 1965, which is on the internet. The early black and white video rippling like some kind of molten metal, or NASA's images of the transit of Venus. It's like watching the home movies of the ancient Egyptians. But there used to be an encompassing belief that the world of art and the world of history, of art as the revelation of history, was something that should be available to any suburban kid. If you want to protect children, expose them to this vast backward shadow of art. If you want to preserve the innocence of a child's eye, and the imagination of a child that can soar and remember its first epiphanies of beauty forever, then give that child the riches of what civilization has produced. Without the moral truth of art, we have nothing. It's when we throw that away that we fail our children.